Okay, we're going to get going this morning. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Brian Piazza. I'm the Director of Science for the Nature Conservancy in Louisiana here in the United States. I'm an applied ecologist and serve as the Project Director for the NBS Explorer. Before we get started, we just ask that you put your questions in the chat and we'll go through them after the presentation. And also, please, if you don't mind, list in the chat where you're joining us from today, if you can. Water availability, often in the form of flooding or drought, is one way climate change impacts human and ecological communities. To enhance community resilience to these extremes, solutions must promote natural environments that slow down water and retain it. Doing this not only promotes a more resilient landscape to flooding and drought, but also promotes other services like fish and wildlife habitat and water quality. Scientific planning tools can help by allowing us to view and evaluate problems and solutions at multiple spatial scales and with the communities that are actually experiencing the problems. Hydrologic models are effective as the foundation for these tools because they allow us to evaluate multiple different options, both now and into the future, and also by showing the interconnectedness of watershed problems and solutions. Today, our team is going to show you the Nature-Based Solutions Explorer. It's a model-based tool that we developed and are using to increase the scope and scale of nature-based solutions in Louisiana to reduce flood risk, adapt to climate change, preserve biodiversity, and promote environmental justice. We're using this tool at both local and landscape scales and with a wide variety of partners. We presented our progress on the NBS Explorer last year during an online session at World Water Week, and I have included the link to this presentation here. Last year, we focused very heavily on the technology behind the tool that was driving the results. This year, we're going to focus on application and actual results for Louisiana. First, you'll hear why we did this work. Then we'll briefly review the technology. Next, we'll live demonstrate the tool, showing you some real-world NBS projects in Louisiana and how the tool is used to plan and evaluate them. Finally, we'll discuss how we take tools like this one out into the community and help people use them to plan and evaluate projects to make them more resilient. We hope that in seeing the tool in action, that you can see an application for this type of approach in your part of the world.
Hi, my name is Janaea Lathers, and I am the Resilience and Mitigation Manager with the Louisiana Office of Community Development, Disaster Recovery. In Louisiana, we are responsible for administering federal grant funding to help our state recover from storms and natural disasters. These disaster recovery dollars support programs in housing, infrastructure, economic development, and mitigation. By leveraging statewide partnerships and proven best practices, we help Louisiana communities recover, rebuild, and plan for long-term resilience so they can better withstand future events. Our work is rooted in a commitment to building safer, stronger communities. That means creating suitable living environments for residents and expanding economic opportunities for businesses, especially in low to moderate income areas. Our role continues throughout the disaster cycle, from preparedness and response to recovery and long-term mitigation. Resilience is central to this mission because it's not just about helping communities rebuild, but about ensuring they are better positioned to withstand the next disaster. An example of why this matters came in 2016. This historic floods that year brought unprecedented rainfall in a very short amount of time. 56 of Louisiana's 64 parishes were declared major federal disaster areas. It was clear that our communities did not have the resources to recover alone, and they needed significant federal support. In recognition that disasters are becoming more frequent and severe, Louisiana launched the Louisiana Watershed Initiative. Backed by $1.2 billion in federal funding, this initiative provides an opportunity to move from a reactive approach to a proactive one, focusing on improving flood management and long-term resilience statewide. As a part of this effort, $130 million has been invested in developing watershed modeling tools. These tools represent a major step forward for Louisiana. They provide a science-based, data-driven understanding of how water moves through our communities. This allows for transparent and objective decision-making, helping us design projects that not only reduce today's flood risks, but also sustain communities against the disasters of tomorrow. The Louisiana Watershed Initiative and its tools gives us the ability to quantify benefits, understand impacts, and prioritize the smartest investments for our communities. What makes these tools particularly valuable is their flexibility. They allow regions to examine both traditional flood mitigation measures and innovative nature-based solutions. They ensure that every dollar spent is moving us towards stronger, more resilient, and more sustainable futures for Louisiana families and businesses. In fact, they've already highlighted opportunities where nature-based approaches can deliver significant co-benefits. Today, you will be able to hear more about these watershed tools, how they work, and how they can support communities like yours in building resilience for the future.
Hi, my name is Sarah Bates, and I'm an environmental engineer with RTI International Center for Water Resources. I'm going to provide an overview of the types of nature-based solutions, or NBS, that can be evaluated within the NBS Explorer. Through discussions with stakeholders, we designed the NBS Explorer to be useful. The tool can be used as a starting point by communities or organizations that want to implement NBS projects at the local or regional scale, but don't know where to start in terms of NBS type or location. It can also be used to aid in submitting competitive NBS project funding applications. It provides on-demand hydrology, water quality, aquatic habitat, and social benefits of NBS projects. This can help applicants meet funding requirements that encourage NBS or specific benefits. The NBS Explorer can also be used to understand shared NBS interests and goals across municipal boundaries. It can serve as a planning tool for identifying how communities might work together to implement NBS and apply for funding sources. We identified NBS that are applicable within Louisiana based on recommended guidance documents from the Louisiana Watershed Initiative and through a stakeholder engagement process. There are 5 types and a subset of 17 practices that can be evaluated. An NBS type is a category that groups specific NBS practices by the overarching management action, and a practice is a specific method used to achieve the action. The 5 NBS types are restoration, preservation, protection of wetland migration corridors, agricultural conservation practices, and green infrastructure. The NBS types available to evaluate are dependent on the climate and land cover scenario that is selected by the user. There are 2 future scenarios, a high emission worst case scenario and a low emission middle of the road scenario. Both future scenarios simulate future climate and land cover. Some NBS types, like restoration, are only applicable in the current scenario because they focus on managing current watershed conditions. Others, like preservation and wetland protection, are only applicable in the future scenario because they quantify the flood benefits of avoiding habitat loss to development in the future. Restoration practices rehabilitate degraded natural lands, riparian areas, or floodplains by reestablishing natural soils, hydrology, and vegetation, or improving floodplain function. The NBS Explorer allows users to simulate a change in the current land cover to a restored land cover over a user-specified implementation area. Preservation practices protect natural lands, riparian areas, or floodplains from development to preserve natural soils, hydrology, vegetation, or floodplain function. On the map, you can see the results from our analysis that identified areas of future urban growth or expanded cropland. The NBS Explorer quantifies the benefits of avoiding these areas of future change by instead preserving natural lands. Urban growth has the potential to impact watersheds in part of the state, but isn't as prevalent in other areas. In Louisiana, a bigger issue is sea level rise, as you'll see on the next slide. As highlighted in blue on the map, Louisiana faces high risk of land loss due to rising sea levels, which is why protecting these areas is critical. This is an issue both along the coast and farther inland. The NBS Explorer evaluates the protection of inland areas identified as potential locations for tidal wetland migration due to land subsidence and potential sea level rise. Users can specify an implementation area over which land cover is protected as wetland migration space, avoiding the projected future condition. Agricultural conservation practices were selected based on the Natural Resource Conservation Service top funded and implemented practices in Louisiana. These practices are broken into 4 groups. Water storage practices add storage to the agricultural land surface to detain or retain runoff before it reaches the stream. Vegetation establishment practices modify the vegetative cover of agricultural land to reduce runoff and improve water quality. Livestock access control practices manage the movement and grazing of livestock on pasture lands to improve water quality. Crop management practices implement cover crops or manage residue and tillage or nutrients applied to cropland to reduce water quality loadings. And finally, green infrastructure practices use plants and soils to capture and store rain that lands on constructed surfaces like streets, sidewalks, or parking lots to reduce flooding and improve water quality by allowing water to soak into the ground below and filter pollutants. NBS Explorer users can specify project details, such as the land cover that sends stormwater runoff to the project and the volume of water that can be captured and stored. For each NBS practice, we developed maps to identify locations with opportunities for implementation with multiple benefits. Through meetings with stakeholders and an assessment of data available in Louisiana, we developed methods for mapping NBS opportunities within the context of the state. First, we mapped suitability areas. For each NBS, we evaluated its geographic suitability across the landscape, where suitability is defined by geophysical criteria applied to datasets such as land cover, urbanization, and vegetation condition. Then we mapped conservation priority areas and low and moderate income areas. As you can see in the figure, NBS suitability areas that intersect conservation priority areas and/or low and moderate income areas are considered an NBS opportunity area. I'll turn it over to Michelle to discuss the data and modeling that underpin the NBS Explorer.
Hi, I'm Michelle Eddy, a senior research environmental engineer with RTI International with 20 years of experience working on watershed management issues. I'm the RTI project manager for the NBS Explorer work, and I'm the technical lead for waterfall development and project work. Before we talk about the modeling behind the NBS Explorer, we want to talk about the scale of the assessment. LWI divided the state into 9 watershed regions to help people determine specific locations for actions. We scaled down this analysis from regions to watersheds to subwatersheds and finally to the catchment level, where catchments define the land that drains into individual reaches of the river. In Louisiana, these catchments are around 2.5 square kilometers. Each of these catchments is then networked together back into full watersheds. At RTI, we developed the watershed flow and allocation model known as Waterfall. We built this model specifically to address different needs that we've seen from our domestic and international clients and partners over the last decade. We've recently redesigned Waterfall to include water quality constituents of total nitrogen, total phosphorus, and sediment, and to differentiate between upland and riparian land in a catchment. Waterfall treats every single catchment as its own watershed and simulates the hydrology and water quality dynamics across the land surface and then into the subsurface. With each of these catchments treated individually and then networked together, both the local and cumulative dynamics of a watershed are known. The model is also calibrated for hydrology and water quality to observations where data is available. Having the model defined in this way allows us to model different management actions at the landscape scale, whether that reflects modifying different land use types to represent restoration, adding water storage properties within urban or agricultural areas, or enhancing the stream channel to represent floodplain restoration or natural channel design. We can also differentiate where actions take place within the landscape of the catchment, allowing the model to simulate the buffering capacity of riparian land areas. For Louisiana, we developed 32 individual basin models that are spread out across the 8 inland LWI regions. We used 26 stream gauges across the state to calibrate model hydrology, with an additional 11 gauges used to validate the calibrated parameters under different hydrologic and surficial conditions. We calibrated water quality parameters to 9 different locations that included highly agricultural areas to urban to natural forest areas. For the waterfall application in Louisiana, we ran 20-year daily simulations for the current and 2 future scenarios to establish baseline conditions across approximately 39,000 catchments. Prior to the live demonstration, we want to provide you an understanding of the data and model simulations underlying the application. We'll start with the hydrologic network. This network is based on the Enhanced National Hydrography Dataset, or NHD+, that's available within the United States. RTI has also created a similar dataset for international applications in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. Each watershed or basin that we model can range from smaller drainages, as you see on the left side, to large complex watersheds with thousands of catchments, as you see on the right side. The physically defined network allows us to move water and pollutants from upstream reaches to the outlet, as well as consider alterations to the network at the point they occur, such as reservoirs, dams, and interbasin transfers. Stepping into the catchments within the model, we index geospatial data from readily available datasets to characterize the surface and subsurface attributes of each catchment. These data range from simple elements such as the area of the catchment to more complex parameters, which we may adjust during calibration, such as how much water can be stored within the upper unsaturated soil layer. For each catchment, we also characterize the stream channel itself, providing information on time of travel through the catchment and potential for stream bank erosion in the reach. Within each catchment, the model operates on the different land uses as you saw in the waterfall cartoon and now see here in actual data representation. These data we characterize for each land use type, which are consistent through the model, and there's data that are specific to land uses within an individual catchment. A selection of these data may also be adjusted during the calibration process, although they all originate from physical observations or literature values. The land use classifications identify which land uses fall in the riparian position and therefore provide additional infiltration and pollutant removal from upland runoff in a catchment. Now that we've described the data behind the model, we can examine the different options to build an NBS into the model at a user's selected location. Depending on which NBS you choose, you may have to simply select a land use type to change, the practice type you want to use, and the area you wish to implement for the NBS. Livestock access control and restoration practices fall in this simple setup category. For other NBS, you'll be given some default or database values by practice that you can then edit as needed to describe your NBS implementation. Green infrastructure and floodplain restoration are 2 types of NBS that require users to make additional decisions about their practice implementation. Once you've decided on your NBS and made your decisions, you'll trigger a new waterfall simulation for your project. When the model runs, it will create 20-year-long daily time series for the different hydrologic and water quality attributes listed here for every single catchment and every single land use. The model compares this new simulation to the pre-computed baseline conditions without the NBS implemented to calculate the benefits of the NBS. I'm going to step through several examples of how the NBS Explorer does the hard work of summarizing all of these time series data into a set of metrics reported for your NBS project. The first example zooms into a few days of runoff simulation within a single land use where we've added an infiltration basin. Over these few days, you can see there was a reduction in runoff from the land surface, as shown as the difference between the dark blue baseline values and the light blue NBS scenario values in the top panel. This reduction in runoff collects in the infiltration basin, where the volume captured is shown in the bottom panel. The benefits of the infiltration basin can also be seen in the way the volume slowly decreases into the next day when there is no runoff, but some water in the infiltration basin remains after a portion has infiltrated into the subsurface. This rate of infiltration and therefore holding time of the basin can be altered by the user in the GI setup screens. Now, instead of the user having to examine these time series data themselves, what we provide to you in the NBS Explorer are summary metrics looking at both the annual and daily maximum changes in runoff. Reductions in runoff reduce the risk of pluvial flooding, so we summarize these data within the metrics results as the average depth across the catchment to relate to the potential inundation depth avoided. To address fluvial flood resiliency, we examine high flow pulses. Classifying these pulses requires several steps that the model performs automatically, and we'll examine those now when zoomed into a few months of daily flows for a small agricultural headwater where we've applied multiple water storage NBS practices. The first aspect to look at is what constitutes a high flow. Using our baseline 20-year simulations, we calculate the 75th percentile of daily flows to use as the threshold above which flows are considered high. In this small headwater example, the 75th percentile flow is quite low, showing a flashy flow regime. Once we've determined which days are classified as high flows, as shown in the dashes at the top of the graph, where black dashes correspond to the baseline and gray to the NBS scenario, we can then determine how long individual pulses last, as shown in the numbers above each dash. Then we determine the change in the pulses due to the NBS by comparing these duration and frequency aspects. A further dive into this stream shows that there's a decrease in the number of events because several events combine into one with the NBS implemented, although that longer event has extremely significantly lower magnitude. In this case, this longer pulse duration is caused by an increase in low flows, circled in green, thanks to large storage volumes allowing water to infiltrate and contribute more consistently to base flow. These complex dynamics are captured in the series of hydrologic metrics summarized in the NBS Explorer. For the high flow pulses, we provide the changes in the count and duration. The changes in base flow and flow magnitudes are captured in additional metrics. One final example of the hydrologic metrics summarized in the NBS Explorer is for groundwater. Groundwater recharge is an important issue for Louisiana as people are shifting between ground and surface water due to declining groundwater levels. This NBS project, which installed 3 large water storage practices, provides greater groundwater recharge throughout the simulation period. The NBS Explorer summarizes this benefit as an increase in the annual recharge depth across the catchment. Outside of the hydrologic benefits, one co-benefit that we have included in the NBS Explorer is the quality of aquatic habitat. A separate analysis led by Dr. Jennifer Phelan from RTI established a set of statewide flow ecology relationships for 2 different recreational and ecologically significant guilds of fish. The floodplain spawners and suckers guilds have different needs related to the pulses during their known spawning periods. Using biological observations and modeled streamflow, the study determined specific flow metrics that correlated with high-quality biologic conditions. The model examines those combinations of metrics to determine whether we have improved the conditions making the habitat more suitable for these 2 different guilds when implementing NBS practices. The quality and change conditions are provided as metrics in the NBS Explorer. We also provide co-benefits of water quality improvement from NBS, evaluating nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. We simulate the fate and transport processes across the land surface, within the subsurface and base flow, and also through stream bank erosion as water moves through the channel. For both surface and base flow loadings, we normalize the loadings by area so that the mapped results by catchment can identify loading hotspots. The in-stream loads represent the cumulative loads being transported through the streams at that point in the network and include the loads coming from stream bank erosion. Benefits are shown as the percent change in load. With all of that technical information defined, I'll now turn it over to Dave to demonstrate the tool itself.
Hey everybody, I'm Dave Harlan, GIS developer from the Nature Conservancy in Louisiana. Can we see the screen? Does anybody confirm?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So thanks for having me at World Water Week. We're gonna just do a quick demonstration of the NBS Explorer tool to kind of see what some of its capabilities are. So we're going to start here with this map of the state of Louisiana. And you can see that the map is made up of 9 different Louisiana Watershed Initiative regions. And in order to set up a project, we have to go inside one of those regions. And so for this demonstration, we're going to look at Region 5. Region 5 is a heavily agricultural region of our state. It is mostly cultivated fields, a lot of rice, a lot of sugarcane, and as such, it has really been managed for maximum drainage to get water off of farm fields as quickly as possible. And because of that, it has a lot of flashy flows. And so to kind of keep going down into our demonstration, we're now going to go into a watershed. You'll see that the regions are made up of these 8-digit Huck watersheds. And then we're going to go inside one of the watersheds here that's in the Lafayette area. This is the Vermilion River. And so I can also turn on some satellite imagery here, and we can kind of look around our watershed and get a feel for the landscape. So as I stated, there's a lot of agriculture in the surrounding region, and we're going to be looking particularly at this part of the watershed near Arnaudville, as Michelle talked about. So in order to set up a project, we have to go into what's called a subwatershed. So in this case, we're going to use this previously created Louisiana 131 subwatershed that captures a lot of this agricultural area. And essentially, all of these catchments drain. You can see the drain lines here, the blue flow lines. All of this water is draining right through this catchment right here. So this subwatershed will just capture this drainage area. And so this is a good time also to talk about opportunity maps. I may just switch back to Street View for a second. So as Sarah talked about, we have these opportunity maps within our tool that allow us to look at locations where there are opportunities for implementing NBS practices. In this case, the purple color represents restoration practices. And so you can see floodplain restoration, riparian vegetation restoration, natural channel design. And essentially where the opportunity maps overlap, you'll see that the purple color gets darker. So that gives you an indication that there are more opportunities, more different types of practices that you can do in that area. And so I'm actually going to turn these off, and we're going to look at some water storage practices. So as I mentioned, this is a heavily agricultural area, and so we have lots of opportunity. All this orange is opportunity for ag water storage practices. And so we're going to go ahead and implement some of those in this subwatershed. So if I go ahead and click into this, it will take us to our subwatershed, and we're actually just going to do new project. And so essentially we just named the project. So I can call this LA 131 Water Storage Live. I have a little tooltip there that I can use. And then what we're also going to do is we need to select a scenario. So as Sarah mentioned, we can choose from one of these climate scenarios. So for this example, we're just going to use the current climate rather than a future climate. And then right here, we select which practices we want to be able to use in this project. And so in this case, we're just going to do water storage. And so we have water storage turned on, so we have that available, and we're just going to do create. So now that we've created a project, it's very easy to start implementing our nature-based solutions. So basically all we do with this checked on, we're just going to click into this catchment right here. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit better. And so what you'll see is we've placed this practice symbol inside the catchment, and also this reveals our land cover map. And so this brown area is all going to be cultivated crops. This yellow area is all pasture and hay. And then this light gray area is woody wetlands. You can see that on the legend here. And so we're going to actually put some water storage practices on all three of those major land cover types. So let's get started. So we're going to start with our practice type. We have the option of pond, wetland creation, and wetland enhancement. So for this first one, we're going to do a pond, and we're going to apply that pond to the cultivated crop area. So in this catchment, we have about 350 acres of cultivated crops. So we're going to select that. Now, the next thing we need to do is establish the contributing drainage area. And so what this is the amount of that 350 acres that will be drained by our pond feature. And so we're going to set that at 80%. And then this capture ratio is the amount of that 80%, which is about 280 acres, that will be made up of the pond itself. So how big is our actual feature? I'm going to leave that at 15%, and you can see that that creates a pond that's just under 42 acres. We also have a precipitation depth to capture. It's set to a default of 3 inches. We'll leave that alone, just leave it as 3 inches, and we'll leave the ponding depth, the surface ponding, at 36 inches. And then down here, we're going to set an infiltration rate of 2 inches per day. And so what this means is going to allow 2 inches of precipitation to infiltrate through the bottom of the pond feature into the groundwater. We're going to leave these at default. We're not going to use a spill pipe on this feature, so we can just leave these blank. And then we're just going to go ahead and save that. All right, so now we've put in our first nature-based solution. And we're going to keep going and add a couple more on those other land cover types that I talked about. So we just click in here again, the same process. We can zoom in a little bit. This time we're going to apply this second feature to the pasture hay yellow area. So we're going to do a pond again. This time we're going to choose pasture hay. You can see that's about 360 acres. We're going to use the same parameters as we just used for our pond on cultivated crops. So we're going to set 80%, 15%. This is going to give us about a 43-acre pond on the pasture hay. We'll also set the infiltration rate to 2 inches per day, and we'll leave these blank again, so no spill pipe again. Go ahead and save that. And then we're not done yet. We're going to add a third feature. And so this time we're going to click in here again. And let me just minimize this so we have a little room. This time what we're going to do is we're going to do a wetland enhancement. And that's because we have all this wetland area here that we don't want to convert to anything. We want to enhance that wetland. And so we're going to choose this riparian woody wetlands. It's about 626 acres. And then we're going to choose an NRCS practice type of riparian wetland enhancement. And then for this practice, you have this little slider bar that allows you to set the percentage of that wetland area that we're going to enhance. And you can see as I move that, the acreage will change here and here. For this example, we're just going to go ahead and put that at 100%. And then we're going to save that. Okay, so now we've implemented 3 nature-based solutions, and we're going to go ahead and run this. And based on Michelle's explanation of the model, essentially what this is going to do when we hit run is it's going to go to the waterfall model and it's going to start calculating the new waterfall metrics based on those land cover changes and the wetland enhancement we just did. So we're going to go ahead and hit run, and you'll see here that this is now running. Now, this can take 3 to 5 minutes, typically, sometimes a little longer if the project's more complex. For the sake of time, we're actually going to go and open one. It's the exact same project that we've previously done. And so this is the same project here in Arnaudville. And the first thing I'll show you is the mapping functionality. So the map here is showing you hydrologic metrics. It's set to stream flow, mean daily flow. You can also look at mean annual flow. What the map is showing you is change from the baseline before we put in the nature-based solution. And so what you're seeing here is a significant decrease in mean annual total flow within the catchment that we put the NBS solutions, but also within these downstream catchments. You can see that the effect of these nature-based solutions precipitates downstream several catchments all the way to the end of our subwatershed, this is like the area that was modeled with our project. And so you can also change these to look at water quality. So you can look at nitrogen, phosphorus. There's also some sediment metrics here. But to take a deeper dive into those results, we can just click into this catchment. And so this is going to pull up our more granular results. And so because this was a water storage project, we're going to get some pretty nice results for the hydrologic metrics. So you can see here our mean daily flow and mean annual total flow have been reduced by about 10%. Our high flow pulse count, we've reduced the number of high flow pulses by about 3 per year. And so without the NBS, this number would be about 28, and we've brought it down to 24. Now you can see that the high flow pulse duration has increased slightly, but that's basically because we have flattened the curve. So instead of a bunch of high quick peaks, we have less high flow pulses, and they last a little bit longer. So we've kind of flattened that curve a little bit. This basically represents a reduction in flashiness in this system. Also, we have a 48% increase in our base flow ratio. So this is indicating the base flow ratio is the difference between your low flows and your average flows. So an increase in this ratio basically means less extreme low flows, which again is reduction in flashiness for this system. And then you can see our runoff metrics here have also decreased. So as Michelle mentioned, this is, in terms of pluvial flooding, where you have rainfall induced flooding, we're reducing that risk there. And then lastly, if we look at groundwater recharge, we have a 41% increase in groundwater recharge. So that's a result of that infiltration rate. We set it to our pond features to infiltrate 2 inches of rainfall per day. And so they're infiltrating that rainfall down through the bottom of the pond into the groundwater. And so that's why we have this increase. Okay, so now let's look at water quality, and we see some really significant results here. Our nitrogen surface load per area is down 88%. Our phosphorus load is down about 90%, as well as our sediment load is significantly reduced. So you can see a project such as this would have very significant impacts to water quality. And in addition to that, we can look at our social benefits. So this is telling us our population within this catchment. It's 438 people, with 59 of those people actually living within the floodplain. And so this is showing how many people would be directly benefited from a project such as this with reduced flood risk and improved water quality. And then also we'll just quickly look at our aquatic habitat, and Michelle kind of showed this before, but this is a result of these water storage features we put in. We have improved the floodplain spawner gill aquatic habitat, and it is now ranked good. So not only does this project have benefits for people, but also to the fish community. And so this is a good example of a project in the agricultural space that can provide multiple benefits through water storage. And so I saw Brian's hand go up, so I think that's my cue that I only have a few minutes left, but if I can really quickly, I'll try to show you guys another project that we set up and ran in Lake Providence, Louisiana. And so if I click into Region 3 here, a Tensas River, and we'll go into this Lake Providence Oxbow. And I'll actually just click this just to clear the screen a little bit. So just a real quick summary of Lake Providence. This is an oxbow lake. This used to be part of the Mississippi River, but over time it became cut off, and so now it's like a backwater. We call this an oxbow lake. And so there's a community here. You can see the developed area. This is Lake Providence. And then it's completely surrounded by agricultural fields. And so this is a real community in North Louisiana that has real water quality problems. They have way too much nutrients and way too much sediment going into this lake, and it causes all kind of issues for the water quality here. they also have some flooding issues in Lake Providence in the developed area. And so we did a little demo project here. Let's see, let's look at this one. And so essentially what we did is all of these agricultural practices for our non-US people, we kind of shorten that to ag here. So our agricultural practices we basically put cover crops in all of these catchments that are surrounding Lake Providence in this cultivated area. Um, and then I think in this one we put, so I can check the NBS. So in this one we put 150 acres of cover crops, and we also did 115-acre wetland enhancement. And then in this large area here, you can see that what we implemented was a nearly 1,000-acre forest restoration. So we basically converted all of the agricultural land within this catchment to deciduous dominated woodland. And then in addition to that, we did a 300-acre wetland enhancement on the wetland part of this catchment. And so this project would also have really significant results. I can show you the water quality really quick because I'm sure I'm running out of time. If we look at the water quality impact here, we have significant decreases in nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. So this is a real world project. This is actually a project that the Nature Conservancy in Louisiana has as a priority to work in this town and to try to do some real on the ground work. So this is a good example of how we're using the Nature-Based Solutions Explorer to investigate the efficacy of doing a project here and sort of capturing what some of the impacts might be, some of the potential benefits. And this gives us information we could put into a grant application or just use for our internal prioritization to basically give us some idea of what we could expect for the benefits. And so I'm pretty sure I'm out of time for the demo. So I hope that was informative, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Chris to talk about our user outreach.
Thank you, Dave. Excellent job presenting. My name is Chris Shepard, and I'm the Director of Science at the Nature Conservancy's Golf program. And I've been developing and testing decision support tools related to nature-based solutions, both in the United States and internationally since 2005. Over the past 20 years of developing these types of decision support tools in coordination with partners and coastal communities, we've learned how important it is to really focus on the end user's experience using the tool and incorporating end user feedback at every stage in the development process. By engaging end users early and often, we can ensure that the technical level of the tool is appropriate for the planners and practitioners that will be using the tools. And we can make sure that we are understanding the types of decisions that they need to be making in the context of planning for NBS. We also gather feedback from end users on the types of outputs that would be meaningful from the tool and the types of reports that the tool generates to help ensure that the information generated by the tool is useful for progressing a project idea and moving the project towards implementation. For the NBS Explorer, we identified potential end users of the tool and engaged them in a series of virtual meetings and workshops to better understand what their level of knowledge is related to nature-based solutions in Louisiana, and to identify the types of decisions that they are trying to make when planning for NBS. We also gathered feedback on elements of the design to help ensure that the tool is easy to understand and usable for these end users. When we created the nature-based solutions opportunity maps, we also engaged NBS experts and practitioners in the state of Louisiana and across the Gulf Coast to get feedback on the methods used to develop the opportunity maps and to review the final outputs of the map layers. During our early phases of end user engagement, several communities volunteered as case studies for applying the NBS Explorer to test out how this works in a real place. The insights gained during these case studies were invaluable and helped us to better understand how communities can use the NBS Explorer to plan and implement NBS projects. Now that the NBS Explorer is complete, we are about to enter a round of internal testing at the Nature Conservancy in which multiple TNC staff who work on NBS projects across the Gulf Coast and the Gulf region will step through a process of using the tool and providing feedback on ease of use and suggest potential improvements to the user experience. Once the internal review is complete, we will test the tool with a broader set of end users and update the tool based on their feedback. We're also developing training resources to ensure that users know how to navigate the tool and understand how to use it to plan for nature-based solutions projects. We expect to launch the NBS Explorer officially in 2026. As part of the launch, we will be completing a series of in-person and virtual trainings so we can reach end users from across the state of Louisiana who are interested in learning how to use the NBS Explorer and apply it in their own geography. Our team is also currently seeking funding to help communities in Louisiana to use the NBS Explorer to develop NBS project ideas using the SUNS planning approach. SUNS, which stands for Scaling Up Nature-Based Solutions, was originally implemented on the Gulf Coast of Florida to create a portfolio of nature-based solutions projects that reduce risk and benefit fish and wildlife across a 3-county region of Florida that was impacted by Hurricane Michael. The SUNS planning process resulted in a portfolio of 75 nature-based solutions projects that are led by communities in this region and that are continuing to advance towards implementation today. Although the SUNS planning process also relies on the use of opportunity maps, SUNS is missing the ability to quantitatively evaluate the flood risk reduction benefits and the co-benefits of NBS projects being considered for inclusion in the SUNS portfolio of projects. The NBS Explorer will fill this quantitative gap, and we intend to link the NBS Explorer into the SUNS planning process so that the Nature Conservancy and our partners can help communities in Louisiana to use the NBS Explorer to create portfolios of nature-based solutions projects that benefit people and nature.
Thanks, everybody. So we built this tool for practitioners in Louisiana to use. If you would like more information about building a tool like this for your geography, please reach out to us. Now we're going to transition to Carrie, and she's going to read the questions in the chat, and then we'll get them answered. Carrie?
Hey, thanks everybody. We had a busy chat. I love the engagement. Thanks so much. So I saw our first question came from Jenny, and during the presentation, they asked, can you touch on how you use AI in the modeling and what pros and cons there are?
We'll give that one to Michelle.
Yeah, thanks for the question. We currently don't use any AI in the modeling. It is all a process-based model with the mass balance and transport principles, but we're toying with a bunch of ideas on how to incorporate AI, all the way from just putting your standard kind of machine learning around and helping to optimize the choices for NBS and the benefits. So, if you have one watershed and you need to reduce flow by a certain amount, let the AI help you pick from the NBS that are listed as opportunities there and size them. And then another concept we're thinking about is putting an LLM around that, where people just go in and say, I need to reduce my sediment loading in this stretch of the river. Tell me what NBS to put here, and letting it take it from there. So nothing yet, but we're always expanding and thinking of next steps.
Thanks for that, Michelle. Next question we had was Natalia asking, how were the opportunity maps identified?
Sarah, can you take that one?
Yeah, thanks for that question. We go into more detail about that in our 2024 World Water Week presentation. But the short answer is we started with design guidance and looking at what someone implementing these practices would specifically be looking at in terms of on-the-ground conditions. And we kind of combined that with the available satellite data, and looked at different things like land cover and vegetation condition, or how urbanized the upstream watershed is, and really took into account all of those different criteria. And we really tailored criteria based on each of the NBS types and practices. So it's a lot of different data sets and a lot of different criteria that we developed, but definitely check out our 2024 presentation for really more detail on how we did that step by step.
Thanks, Sarah. And we do have a QR code on our slides that you can scan, and I think maybe the World Water Week might have kind of a log of past presentations as well if you want to catch that one. Our next question is the NBS Explorer an open source tool? I think we did answer that a little bit, but it was a two-part question. Second being, does it integrate weather and climate forecast information from various meteorological organizations?
And then, Carrie, the next question, why don't you read that one too? It's very similar, and I'll take the first part, and then we'll pass it to Michelle for the climate stuff.
Yeah, so the next one is how does the NBS Explorer tool account for uncertainties in future climate scenarios when evaluating solutions?
Okay, so the answer to the first question is it is not open source. We did build this for Louisiana practitioners, and so we will have actual practitioners that are doing planning and watershed planning for our state, logging into the tool, and there will have individual logins and runs will be saved. So it's not open source for the general public to use because runs will actually be saved and communities will be working on projects that will be stored within the tool. So it will be accessed through the Louisiana Watershed Initiative. We'll have a landing page where it will be housed along with the other modeling tools, and be accessible. So we didn't build this for the general public to get on because it will be saving runs, model runs and projects. Janaea, do you have anything to add? Did I forget anything about that before we go to Michelle?
I don't have anything to add to that.
Thank you. Janaea is our state partner, and she's working with us to make all of this happen for the people on the ground. All right, so Michelle, would you please take the climate questions?
Sure. So and I think since we're running a little lower on time too, I think there was I'm going to wrap in like the environmental changes question that's further down as well. So
Great.
when the model runs, we do use a set of data, and I think there was another question. This might wrap up several. We are looking at historic climate data for the baseline conditions, and we use a gridded data set for the US, where we have the daily data that has been interpolated from stations. So our version of looking at climate uncertainty is using 20 years of all different storm events. So in Louisiana, there were several hurricanes included within those events or within those years. For the future uncertainties, we've done the two different climate models where we looked at kind of the continue as usual middle of the road scenario and then also the extreme scenario. So those climate data that we had in the model were then adjusted to meet those emission scenarios. And again, we use 20 years of daily data that captures both droughts and very high flow periods or very extreme weather periods. And then that is all built into the summary metrics. So you can really, if you were looking at the individual data, you can get down and understand the dynamics of those big events, but we also summarize it across the whole period of time. For the land use and environmental changes, the model is run on a single land use cover throughout the period of time. So just like climate, we use the different scenarios. So if we needed to look at the more developing kind of concerns versus what it was, that is a different land use scenario. And so we again built that into the future low and high scenarios where our land use changes were driven by the vegetation and urban changes coming from those climate changes. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks so much, Michelle. And I I do, there's a lot of questions in here, so thanks everybody again for being so engaged. There's some more about modeling, but I do want to make sure that we leave time. I see a couple people asking about if this can be applied in other areas outside of the US. So that one would go back to you as well, Michelle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's a really important question that touches on that about data poor areas, and we talked about that a lot in our presentation last year. So Michelle, can you address both of those?
Sure, yeah. So the waterfall model itself has been designed to be applied anywhere in the world. The sister model to waterfall, hydrobid, has been deployed in Latin America for about a decade as well. So we have the proven capabilities to set up in the lower data regions. The analytical hydrography data set that we created to put the modeling on top of in these other areas of the world where we don't have as intense data as we have in the US, it ends up being just a bit coarser. So in, the US, we've got about, 2.5 square kilometers of land that we look at in a catchment. In Latin America, it's more like tens of square kilometers. So it's a little bit coarser of a modeling, but we still are able to get everything we need from the data that's available into the model. And that was one of our purposes for building Waterfall as well, is it's not as intense as other models out there that need really detailed data. This kind of takes a step back from all of those intensive data needs, but takes a step in on the scale of the analysis in terms of spatial. So we balance it that way, and we are able to apply waterfall anywhere in the world, and then therefore we could put the NBS application, NBS Explorer application on top of it to serve data from it. And this also goes to the open source question. Currently, Waterfall is held by RTI. It is our product, and we use it to do projects for people. So we worked with Louisiana and TNC to model out the state for them, and then they are licensing the NBS Explorer application for their use. And so that model would follow to other areas of the world, but we also are exploring other business models to get people a little more hands-on and other types of training on the model. So that'll be kind of a stay tuned.
Carrie, this one public education question is
I saw
important.
that one too.
I'd love
I
to
was like,
throw that
let's
one to
let's
Janae.
end on a
Yeah,
social on a social benefit as well, since that's a big key of our tool as well. So the question is, what has the public education campaign around these type of projects been, especially raising awareness amongst the farming population? So Janae, if you could just talk about that a little bit, even expanding on just other LWI initiatives.
So we have within our implementation looked at NBS and just the overall science and engineering function of hydraulic and hydrologic models to support our communities in building towards flood risk reduction. Over the past 6 months, we started engagement within each of our regional watersheds. Each region has a specific and unique um, type of geography. So we reached out to our planning organizations and mayors and local municipalities to talk about what tools that we have available, and to talk about the problems that they are seeing in their areas. So we are going to be able to do a bit more of that with our NBS tool throughout the next year. And I think that having engagements like that, supporting our communities and supporting not only what we have so far, but what future interpretations of the tool need to be put into it will support us moving in the future.
thank you. All right. Is there anything else that we quickly need to touch on? I think we've kind of hit all of our, at least answered multiple questions with one answer. Is there anything else?
Brian, there was a couple of questions about like sort of like how do you validate the
Yeah,
results? And so, I mean, Michelle could probably speak to this better than me, but it is important to understand that if you were to implement the projects that you design in our tool, you would still need on the ground like engineering build out. So like you would still need to build out exactly where you're going to place the nature-based solutions and how many acres they are and the specific hydrology. The tool is a catchment scale tool. And so it's giving you the results within the catchment, not specific to like a local site. And so, you know, I you're not implementing anything with the tool. What you're doing with the tool is you're vetting the concept and you're getting sort of a recommendation by the tool of like, yes, these practices would be successful here, and here are some of the potential benefits, but you're still going to need to do engineering to implement. And so I think that's where a lot of the validation will come in. Michelle, I don't know if you want to add anything to that or if I said that right, but
Yeah, no, you completely answered that correctly. So this is, this tells you that you're gonna get benefits from this type of NBS with this general type of project in this local area. The next, that we intended it to be that way to help you provide those data so you can put that in funding applications, which will then let you take the next step of fully designing out the NBS with, full-on engineering drawings. So it'll come from that way. We've also done case studies, one where we provided results to a stormwater park that put in several features where they didn't actually know their benefits, but they knew they'd get benefits. So we were able to quantify that for them. And then we've had another case study where we worked on the upfront, gave them the green infrastructure type options, and then they went through with that further detailed modeling and design and were able to adjust to fit the specific needs. So we're kind of working all these things through, and as we use this more and more, we'll have more validation coming out.
All right. And with that, we'll end. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and for your time. And we collected your emails that you put in the chat, and you'll be hearing from us. And we look forward to talking with you again in the future. Thank you.